And what was the highest rank that you achieved?
Aviation radio man, second class.
And what were the general locations that you served in during the war?
Pacific Theater.
Okay. And were you drafted or did you enlist?
It was a funny situation. I wanted to enlist, but they froze the enlistments because everybody was going in the Navy. Nobody wanted the Army. So then they put it on the state quota. The state of, or the town of Middletown had a quota. They had to supply so many eligible to be drafted.
So when you did go to try and sign up, they didn't let you?
No, but I filled out all the information as an enlistee, but they froze the enlistments because there was too many that were selecting the Navy. Mm-hmm. So I went in as a USNI inductee.
Okay. So you said you were living in Middletown at the time, correct?
Yeah.
Do you recall the date on which you tried to sign up?
No.
Why did you join? Why did you decide to join the military?
Well, I guess I figured I was going to be drafted anyway, so when the war started, I was still in high school. I was a senior in high school. I graduated in June, and March 3rd, I think it was, of the next year, I was in the service.
And so why did you decide to pick the Navy for your branch?
My brother was already in the Navy, and he was happy with what he was in and doing, and so I just decided to take the Navy also.
And how did you feel about going into the military?
I was anxious to go. All my friends, we were all, the whole class that graduated that year was eligible for the draft, and we just went.
So, what happened when you first went into the military? Did you go right into boot camp?
Right into boot camp, yep, in Sampson, New York.
And what were your experiences like in boot camp?
It was good. There was a lot of physical activity, You had to be able to show your strengths, I guess, or weaknesses. And I enjoyed boot camp.
So, what kinds of activities did they actually have you do? What was it like living on in the camp there?
Well, all the meals were regimented. You went to meals at certain times, and there were regular exercise things you had to go through in the morning, physical exercises, and meals were at a certain time. You had to be there for your meal. It was really regimented. It was a new way of life for me, really.
Do you remember any of your instructors there?
Not really.
So was boot camp difficult for you?
No, it wasn't. In high school. I played 3 sports: baseball, basketball, and football. And I was a quarterback on the football team, so all this was
pretty routine.
Pretty routine for me.
So after boot camp, where did you end up going to first?
to aviation radio school in Memphis, Tennessee. I was real hot on airplanes, flying. I wanted to be a pilot, but I knew I couldn't be a pilot. I didn't have the education, really. I was very weak in math. I shunned math because I was afraid of it. But we started in the aviation radio school in Memphis, and I don't know exactly how long that was, but it was probably about 13 weeks.
And what were your first impressions when you arrived there?
Good. They were good because it was not as big as the boot camp. You know, it was smaller, and the living quarters were good. A little strange, different climate for me.
From living in New England?
Yeah.
So when you first arrived there, what were your assignments and what were you doing?
Well, one thing we had to learn was the Morse code, and that took quite a while because once you were in the branch and flying, you're going to be it had to be Morse code, you know.
So what else did you have to do while you were? Did you learn anything else while you were there?
I don't really remember anything else. Just how to use a code in communications when you had to.
Mm-hmm. So then, where did you go after training there?
Went to Fort Lauderdale to get into the flying. That's what we were prepared for. I was going to be a crewman on a torpedo bomber.
Okay, and what kind of assignments and training did you go through there in Fort Lauderdale?
Well, we had to learn how to use machine guns, and I really don't remember much about what else.
So then, after your training on machine guns and everything in Fort Lauderdale, where did you go from there?
We were assigned to a pilot, and when our training was over, we went all up to that recreational area up north there where the squadron was formed, and Martha's Vineyard up there was where the squadron was formed, and we were assigned when we left for Lauderdale. There was about 13, I think. 12 of them were assigned to the West Coast. One was assigned to the East Coast to be in this VT-87, and that happened to be the East Coast, because the pilot I was assigned to, he was not an ensign, he was a Lieutenant JG. He had a little bit more choice of where he wanted to go, and he wanted to go there, that's where he went. And me and the gunner named Romberger, we were a team We went in as the three of us as a team into VT-87.
Do you remember Ron Berger's first name?
Robert. I still have contact with him. He's still alive. And to my knowledge, I don't have anyone else that I know from the squadron days that is still alive. But I do maintain contact with Robert and his wife, and I will tell him about this.
So when you went back up north, what were your responsibilities and your duties up there?
Just to be the aviation radio man and all the drills we performed.
Did you do anything more with the torpedoes while you were up here, or was that only in Florida?
We dropped, when we were practicing torpedo runs, we did drop torpedoes that were, they would travel, but they would go under a target.
Mm-hmm.
There was no explosives in them. They were torpedoes, but there was no explosive. But we learned how to...
Just the general, how to launch them and everything like that.
Right, because to drop a torpedo, you had to be flying straight and level. You had to be 100 feet above water. And you had to be at a certain speed so that it would work.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a lot of flights practicing. Then later on, they found out that torpedo bombers were sitting ducks. They were like flying coffins. If you made a torpedo run, they made one. Early in the war, they made a torpedo run where there was only one man that survived. The Japs picked him off, flying in straight and normal, 100 feet above the water, and blew every one of them out of water. There was one man that lived through that. His name was Ensign Gay. And they brought him back to the States as a hero. And they were getting everybody to buy war bonds. And that was how he ended his careers in that phase, because he had been through enough.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you know all that going in? How dangerous it would be for you?
No, I didn't. That came after.
So during your whole training, were you ever scared about flying over enemy's territory like that?
Not really. I don't know why, but I wasn't afraid.
So then, well, after Martha's Vineyard, where did you go?
After Martha's Vineyard, that's when the squadron went on board the carrier, the Randolph. We were assigned after all the training. We were assigned to the Randolph. We were on the Randolph was a brand new carrier. We were the first on it. So I am a plank owner. And anyone that was there during the commissioning ceremony, where there were thousands of people, became a plank owner of one plank on the flight deck, and I still am an owner of one plank. Well, I don't even know if the Randolph is still in existence today.
So then, once you got there, what did they have you do?
Once we got where?
To the Randolph. What did you have to do after that?
That's where we went down. The Randolph went down into the Gulf of Perry, and that's where we did all our training of flying off the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Missions every day.
And what would those consist of?
Well, making a run on a target. And a lot of times they would drop smoke bombs in there as a target. You know, it was all training to go into combat.
And how long did that training last for?
Well, we were aboard the Randolph, I think, for about 4 months down in before we left for the combat area. But we never went on the Randolph. They took us off the Randolph in San Francisco. They put a different air group on that had more. Our fighter pilots had not been yet trained in fighter bombing. The fighters were just fighter escort planes, but they also used them for fighter bombing. They had bombs attached underneath their wings, so it was like a two-way, two different things they could do.
And so from San Francisco, what happened then?
After our pilots became all trained, completely trained in all phases, we were sent to Maui, Hawaii, where we did more training, and then that's where we were transferred. We were brought to Hawaii on the carrier, the Bunker Hill, which had been in action before and were really experienced. But on the Bunker Hill, we were just passengers. They took us to Hawaii, and then then after that we went to war.
How long were you in Hawaii?
I would say about 4 months or so.
Did you do any more training while you were in Hawaii?
Yeah.
And what was that training like?
The same, going out on simulated targets and doing missions like that.
At this time, were you comfortable with everything that you had to do up until this point with actually bombing the targets?
Yes. I was ready. I was well trained.
And so, up until this point, what were typical days like for you while you were in the service?
Well, it was pretty regimented of what you could do. You had liberty where you could go into town and have a few drinks or whatever, and then come back, and if you had any duties of helping clean the barracks or all of that, you did.
So then, after Hawaii, you went straight to Pacific Theater?
Yes.
And where did you go first?
Well, we joined the fleet. We made I flew 10 missions, which are all spelled out in there, the exact details on all of them, and received an air medal. And
after Hawaii, do you remember specifically what you had to do right after Hawaii and when you went out to war?
Well, I remember the missions. Uh, and we were on a mission, my 10th one, when we received the message over the air to abort. The Japanese had just surrendered, and we were not to drop the bombs. We could not go back. You can't ever leave an aircraft carrier with bombs and not drop them and then land on that, come back and land on the carrier.
Mm-hmm.
You could never land there with explosives on it, or you possibility of blowing yourself out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
So when it was announced that the war was over, we were just dumbfounded. Felt like celebrating right then and there. But that's how the war ended for me on my 10th mission.
So just to go back a little bit, what were some of your other missions?
They're all spelled out of there. I don't remember the names of the
Well, not necessarily names. Just what did you have to do on them? What was your job, and what were the things that you had to do while you were on the missions?
I was the aviation radio man. When we trained to drop torpedoes, we had a radar screen, which I, as a radio man, radar was at its infancy in them days. But I had a scale there to read off the yardage to him when he got exactly 1,200 feet. But if we weren't dropping torpedoes, we just flew and dropped. If we were flying close support for the soldiers on the ground on Okinawa, we would drop skip bombs that were dropped would not explode on impact, but on a timer. They were timed.
Mm-hmm.
And supported the ground troops would call to the squadron leader as to what target they wanted us to drop the skip bombs into. They had these old tubes that were pillboxes for the Japs, and we were closely supporting the ground troops at that time.
So you were flying missions over Okinawa during that time?
Yes.
Do you recall anything else about that?
Just that it was kind of scary flying. When Japan came out with the kamikazes, they were suicide bombers, and because when the Japs started that, they knocked off a couple of our carriers or other ships, so that the way to get around that was to keep the carriers or other ships further away, so that we were flying extreme distances. You only have so much gas. When you take off of a carrier, you're going on a mission. You've got to have enough gas left to get back on the carrier. And so that made it very hard flying extreme missions for us. In fact, there was one mission where we came back, and it was dark, and the planes were all that were on the mission were low on gas, and the commander issued the carrier to turn on the lights. They never ever lit up the carrier because of the Japanese submarines. You were giving them something they could pick right off. But they figured to get our people back on the ship, they risked that and did turn the lights on, and we landed safely. We didn't lose a plane on that. But it was scary.
Was there ever a fear when you were flying these long missions that you would ever run out of fuel and crash land somewhere where you couldn't be rescued?
Well, I thought about that. I had no control over that. Once we were in the air, we were at the control of the leader.
So how many night missions did you actually have to fly?
Well, I only made 10 missions then the war ended.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the only one that I recall we were landing at night.
And so, aside from the night mission in Okinawa, do you remember any other missions? Can you recall any other ones that you went on?
They're all listed in there by names, and I don't remember the names.
No, the names aren't. Do you just remember any specific details that you had to perform while you were performing these missions, while you were carrying them out?
I never saw an enemy plane in the air. The Japanese Air Force was pretty well demolished by that time. So I never had to do anything but my routine radio work. I had a 30 caliber Stinger in the back of that, where my little compartment, we used to call it the bilge. It was very tight quarters. You never wore you had your parachute in there, but it was on a clip. If you were going to have to go out, you have to put that on to bail out. So I never had to do anything like that.
So when you had to go and fly these missions, what did you have to do to prepare to go out on these missions?
Everything was, we were all prepared just to get in the plane and do what our job was.
Mm-hmm. Well, was there a checklist that you had to go through to make sure everything was prepared for before taking off?
That was all done by personnel that were on the carrier.
Okay.
That was not our duty.
So when you were flying these missions, were you ever fired at from the ground?
Yes.
What were those experiences like for you? While you're looking, just what was it? What were you feeling when you would be shot at from the ground? What was going through your mind at the time, whenever that would happen?
To tell you the truth, it was fear of flak coming up and
Mm-hmm.
one shot and you're gone.
And how often would that happen?
Well, it would happen on every mission.
Mm-hmm.
There was flak. There was always flak. I have written in here, flak was so thick you could walk on it.
Was your plane and on any missions were you ever hit?
No, we lost one plane. And there was a guy, I don't know if you remember a guy named Dick Trugaskis that wrote Guadalcanal Diary.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote, he went to all these bases of the Army, the Navy, Marines, and always went on missions with the guys, so he knew what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So he went on a mission with us, one mission, and came back, returned to the ship. The next mission we flew, the guy that took him got shot down in the tree. The pilot, the radio man, and were all killed. That was the one casualty we had, the one loss. And he escaped it by one flight. And that's the way he did a lot of reporting for people back home to know what the hell was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just and there's pictures of all this that I'm talking about right in there.
So in between missions, what were you doing while you were on the carrier?
Nothing. We were passengers on that carrier.
Mm-hmm.
The only ones that we were responsible to was their squadron commander. While if we were in port somewhere, they would use us to help load supplies and stuff like that. While there was no chance of flying, they used us as ship personnel, more or less. Once that carrier was underway, we always went when it was time to eat, chow call, the air crewman went first. The air crewman, so we were kind of looked at in one respect as prima donnas by the crew, but when we came back from a mission, the first thing they wanted to know is, what'd you get? What'd you hit? What'd you do? For the scoreboard that was painted on the ship, that was the pride of each ship. What did they do? How many kills did they make? And they're all listed in there. That book has a wealth of information in it.
So what were aside from just being a passenger, what was a typical day like on the carrier itself?
Well, we had a ready room, which was kind of plush compared to the ordinary crew members. What they had was just a fold-up bunk, and we'd play cards, we would talk, we would every once in a while we'd get mail out of mail ship, and you'd be just starving to read and you felt so sorry for any guy that didn't get a letter or several.
So is that how you stayed in touch with your family?
Yes, but everything we sent to our family was screened before it went out, so you weren't giving away any information that might do damage.
Who did you stay in touch with while you were away?
My parents and my sister. And I had a brother that was also in the Navy, but he was up in the Maine area, the Atlantic service. He was a radio man, a good radio man.
So were there any other experiences on the missions or on the carrier that really stood out to you?
Well, there are. Did I do something wrong?
No. Training to fly off the carrier, what was that like?
Well, it was the first couple of times you take a catapult shot, it scares you to death, because someone down below way down there, that there's a, you're locked onto the catapult, clipped on. The catapult is about 6 decks down below, and it's steam driven. And you've got the head mechanic, the chief mechanic, stands there and tells the pilot, rev up full. And he does, and he listens, and he's an expert. If that engine sounds all right, he says, fire. So the guy, right then and there, you're in God's hands and his. If he goes off, when you first catapult off, you go so fast, if you're not bracing your head, you can snap your neck. And it's scary the first couple of times you do it.
Were you told to brace yourself before
Yes,
taking off?
yes.
So how many times did you actually have to go through that the catapult?
I've made four I've made 40 carrier landings. Some were catapult takeoffs, some were running takeoffs. When you have a running takeoff, you can't have, there's 101 aircraft on that carrier. 15 torpedo bombers, 15 dive bombers, and 71 fighter bombers. If you were going to go on a mission, strike something, you'd have a morning flight and a later afternoon flight. The morning flight would go out, do its thing, and come back. Then put them planes down on the hangar deck, and the next flight would be brought up and they'd go. That way, you couldn't ever take all 101 aircraft off on a mission. By the time the last one got off, the first one would be out of gas. So that's how they did it. They set them off in morning flight and an afternoon flight.
So what was it like for you landing again? Was that a lot less stressful than taking off?
Well, when you're landing, all we had was a signal officer with flags, and the planes were coming in. And when everything's running right, you come down and you're flying just above stall speed, slow as you can go without stalling and dropping out of the air. And there's a horn going on that tells you you're at stall speed, tells the pilot and the crewman. And the guy's there with his flags, and when he gets, just before you get over the carrier, he gives a cut, and the plane drops, and it always lands tail first. That's where Navy pilots are different than regular pilots. Mm-hmm. And there are string of cables going across the deck that are raised up maybe about this high. And that tail hook has to capture one of those cables to stop you. It's almost like you're hitting a brick wall. And then as soon as you stop, the crews come out, unclip that, and you got to get out of the way because there's another one 35 seconds in back of you that's got to come on. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything more precise than aircraft carrier pilots and crews. It's just fabulous.
So were you, the entire time you were landing, were you bracing for the time when the tail hook finally caught the cable?
Yeah, I was hitting it with my seatbelt on.
Mm-hmm.
Hoping it would hit, and it always did. In the event that you missed the cables, there was a a thing that came up to prevent you from going off the end of the ship.
Oh, you wouldn't have to take off again and then circle around?
You didn't take off again. When you were, if you missed that, if your tail hook missed and didn't catch anything, this other barrier would stop you right there. And if necessary, they would unhook you and push you off the end of the dock in the plane just to get you the hell out of the way.
For the next
because 35 seconds later, another plane had to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't, you'd soon have, you can't keep going around. If you miss, that's it.
Did you ever see a plane not hook right away?
Nope.
That's good then.
I'm here.
Do you feel like with all the training that you had to do you feel like that adequately prepared you for what it would be like to actually fly the missions?
I was just totally believed that I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. If I had to be in the war, this is what I wanted to be doing, and I liked it.
Well, what I meant was, with all the simulations that you had to do for dropping the torpedoes, do you feel that was an adequate preparation for what it was actually like to drop the torpedoes on actual targets instead of just
yes,
the dud ones?
I thought it was adequate because there's nothing else you could do. If you were flying, the pilot's job was fly just above stall speed, certain speed, straight and level, and my job to read off the yardage to him, and then he would drop it. Everybody was well trained on what they had to do. I was comfortable with that.
Were there people around you that were less comfortable and made your job more difficult?
Nope. I don't remember any disagreements aboard that carrier at all, ever.
So did you ever go on leave while you were serving?
The only leave I got on was at the end of a training period. You could go home and then come back.
When the carrier would dock, how long would it dock for?
Well, it all depends on whether or not there were any sort of repairs that had to be made. Like, there was one big mission that our carrier missed because we had pulled in for routine service, and then we were ready to go out on the next mission. And when we did, we got out a little ways, and they had trouble with the big screws that were driving the carrier. We had to pull it to Guam for repairs. So we missed a couple of missions because of that. And it cost me another air medal. And the reason I didn't give a damn about the air medal, but when the war was finally ended, and your job was all done, and you were just waiting now to get discharged. And an air medal was worth so many points. If you were married, it was worth so many points. So when the war actually ended, I was back up in Seattle where we pulled in, and there were no more flight duties. I was off the ship permanently. It was over. And it was just a question about everybody wanted to go home now at once, but you got so many points for being married, so many points because of decorations, and so many points for this or that. So I was stuck for about 3 months there doing routine. In fact, I even worked on, this sounds silly, but I worked on the details on a garbage truck. And I said, this is what we get for fighting the war, delivering the garbage, picking the garbage up. I got a little poem there I read about it. It's in one of these books.
Mm-hmm. So when you were actually in the war, did you suffer any injuries or anything like that?
Nope, never got scratched. In fact, in that phase of what you're in, there's no such thing as a minor injury or anything. Either you got enough to get back on board that ship, or you're not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, we were very fortunate we lost one plane. If the war had gone on longer, I'm sure we'd have lost more, but we just happened to be well trained and got out there at the right time. We were able to complete what we were trained for and get out of there safely.
Were there any scares with Japanese submarines in the area? Were they ever close enough to actually try and attack you?
I don't recall anything. To get back aboard ship, you had to go by. You had to go by what we call a picket sub of our own. That was identified. It had an IFF thing on it. Would tell you whether you were friend or foe. The Japs had at times captured some of our planes and would hook up on a mission coming back. And you had to go through that IFF identification, friend or foe, before they let you on that ship.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, one time, one of the, I don't know if it was our plane or not, had, it wasn't working. IFF wasn't working, and they kept saying, there's one bogey, there's one bogey, there's one bogey.
So how was that finally resolved?
I don't know, but we got permission to land, so.
Was that scary for you?
It really wasn't, because I really wasn't aware of what really was going on.
Mm-hmm. You had no idea what was.
I didn't know how close we were to not making it back on board that ship.
So were you under any kind of pressure or stress the entire time you were serving, or at any time while you were serving?
You always get hyped up when you're going on a mission. You can't, if there's anybody that says they don't have any fear whatsoever of getting back, they're lying.
And how did you manage that fear?
Just by getting up in our ready room and celebrating a little bit. We could talk about it. One thing we had in that ready room, we were like exceptional individuals, so to speak. We were able to have films, movies, and stuff that the ordinary crewmen on a ship weren't allowed to all congregate in one area to watch a movie in case you took a hit. So we made friends with certain people aboard ship that we allowed to come in to watch our movies and all that, and we'd space it out, for different ones. they, they, the regular crew on a ship, or I don't know how many people are on there, two or 3,000 on a carrier, and a lot of them didn't think too highly of us, getting all the special privileges and having all, what they didn't have. But they were always standing in line wanting to know, what did we get? What did we get this time? What did you get this time?
Were there any Were there any times where there were confrontations with the other crewmen?
No.
So aside from the movies and playing cards in the ready room, what else did you do for any kind of fun or entertainment?
Well, if we were underway, nothing. Play cards. If we were in port, there were people like Eddie Bracken that would come on or put on these shows. Bob Hope and all of them would go to various areas like that while the ship was in for minor repairs or just a rest.
Mm-hmm.
And there were all these shows that came through that everybody was allowed to go to. Not all at once, but
these were official USO shows, or just
yeah.
How many do you think you went on or went to?
What
The USO shows. How many do you think you saw?
Probably 4 or 5.
And what was it like to see them? Did it remind you of home? Was it comforting to see these?
It was so good. It was recreation. I mean, and it was really good to see some of that. You were really tickled, especially the gals that came on. Bob Hope always had nice-looking girls with him.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times now. Just to go back a little bit, you said you had to station in Guam for emergency repairs. Do you recall any other locations where you would dock for resupplies or any other reasons for having to dock?
I don't recall any others.
Okay. So, do you recall any other moments that really stood out to you while you were serving?
Well, the fact that our parachute rigger, we had during different times of training where there had to be crews bail out. And the parachute rigger was batted 1,000. I think there was about 6 all told, where we've had people bail out, and each time successfully. The crewman had to bail out. The pilot stayed and tried to come in with the landing, but it was considered so dangerous that they had the crew bail out first.
So what did you think of your officers and the other crewmen that you served with?
Excellent. They're all excellent people. I didn't have any bad feelings about anybody in that squadron. We didn't. The dive bomber crewmen were sort of they hung together. In the torpedo bomber crewmen, we hung together. There wasn't any bad feelings between us, but we didn't mingle aboard ship. They had their ready room, we had ours.
Now, you did keep a couple of journals. What made you decide to keep track of, or to keep the journals or start them?
I'm not quite with you on this one.
Oh, the log you have in your lap there. Did you start that yourself?
No, no, this is an official. When you're flying is hazardous duty. We got good pay for a month for hazardous duty every month. The regular people in our squadron that just had ship duties, they didn't get that pay. They used to call them flight skins. So every once in a while, if we're important and just flying, doing some training missions, they would love to be allowed to go on a training mission and have one of the crewmen not go. But if they flew 4 hours that month, they would be eligible for skins. They used to kind of begrudge us getting that extra money, but
So you said that you were. It was after your 10th mission that the Japanese surrendered. Do you remember anything else about that day? What was that day like for you?
that day like was Eureka. Was when we came back on that ship, the war was over. When the war was over and they signed the Japs signed the peace treaty, we were in Tokyo Bay, and our skipper had warned us, if you see any Japanese aircraft flying, shoot them down. Not vindictively, but in a friendly sort of way. That was Billy Miles' exact words. Shoot down all snoopers, but in a friendly sort of way.
Oh, so after Seattle, after you did the trash duty and everything like that, what was your homecoming like? Did you go right from Seattle back to Connecticut?
Me and another guy named Harry Gilbert, Harry Gilder, decided we were going to take there was a provision made that if you wanted to take your discharge there instead of home, you could have $300. That was the airfare from there to home that they would give you if you were going to go home and get discharged where you were inducted. But Harry Gilder and I decided we were going to freelance out on the West Coast. So we took the $300 cash, and I was discharged out there instead of being discharged in New Haven. We lasted about a week. We freelanced. All we wanted to do was come home. So we didn't. But the $300 sounded like, oh boy, we're gonna. That was gone all at once. Buy a ticket to come home. And then the partying started at home for all of our friends that made it home. There were some that didn't. Army. Battle of the Bulge was a tough battle.
Mm-hmm. So when you did get home, was there any kind of transitional period for you where you had to get used to being back at home?
Well, it was just so different that you could go out. You didn't have to ask anybody for liberty. You just did what you wanted. Of course, I was glad to be home for a while and really glad to see some of my buddies that had been in the Army.
Did you go back to school or go to work after you got back home?
I went to work. I got a job for a while in a place that I forget what the hell it was that they manufactured, but
So you worked at a factory?
I worked in a factory. My father was a lace weaver, which was a highly skilled form of running a machine. And he made a good living at that. He had no education. He came across from Europe when he was 9 years old, and he only went to third grade. That was his as high as he went. But he still, there were no child labor laws then. Kids 9, 10 years old could get jobs in factories. He did, and he learned how. After quite a long while, he became a real proficient in his trade. So the job that I had wasn't anything I was going to do for life. So I got a job where he worked, and I became a lace weaver, and a good one. And I did that for quite a while before I got a chance to get a job. My backyard, our backyard neighbor, was vice president of the Middletown Savings Bank, and I had been out of work for a while because there was no orders on the machine that I was running. So they were building a power plant in Middletown, or adding on to a power plant there, not a nuclear or fossil plant. And I got a job there in the utility, which, I always figured if I get either with the phone company or the light company, I'd be set.
Mm-hmm. So, while you were in the service, did you make any close friendships?
Yeah. And for a while, we exchanged Christmas cards with quite a few people, but the only one I really maintained contact with was this Romberger that I will call and tell him what I'm doing today.
So, your time in the military, did it influence the way you thought about war, either while you were in war or after?
Well, I think I felt more sorry for the guys that were slogging it on the ground than I did for what we went through. At least we were every day I could take a shower and write letters, and every once in a while we'd meet a mail ship and be able to. But I felt. I guess I kind of forgot the question.
How did your time in the military affect the way you think about war?
I wouldn't want to see anybody have to go to war. If you go and you come back, you're real fortunate. But I'm not one that advocates going to war. That's for sure.
Did you join any veteran organizations when you got back home?
I was in what the heck did they call it? The American, what was it? American Legion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I was in. A member for a while, but not. I didn't stay with it too long.
Have you attended any reunions Did you attend any reunions after the war?
Yeah, we had a couple. One of them was down in where the Hells Angels were flying, and I can remember them admonishing us where they gave us a position to be on a field and watch them land. But they said some of you guys that are a little older better watch out, she says, because you might have a heart attack when you see this. We weren't that old.
How did your service and your experiences affect you personally?
I think I grew up. It was a lot different than being in high school. High school was fun, but I grew up and became a responsible citizen and husband and a father, and here I am, still kicking.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about or go over that we maybe didn't go over that I didn't ask you?
No, you've covered the spectrum pretty good, but I would still like you to go through that book.
Oh, absolutely.
And see all these things.
Yep.
And see if there's anything you want me to add to something or subtract. I'd really like you to see that because I think you'll get a very lot of good, solid information out of seeing some of the stuff more adequately than just talking with me. The Japanese were island hopping and they were, skipping some.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an excellent opportunity. On our first couple of missions, we were going somewhere else, but we also dropped the squadron, also the fighter bombers would drop some here to keep them from growing crops and listen and all that there. So that's what this was. This was Thoreau. That was the first one.
That was your first mission?
Yeah, I think so. On May 17th, the squadron cut its eye teeth against Thoreau Isle on the bypassed atoll of Lalealap in the Marshall Islands, while en route from Pearl to Ulithi. Ulithi is where we joined the fleet.
Mm-hmm.
This was a warm-up. There's Okinawa, close support on some of these. You can make out the tombs there that they were living in pillboxes. And this is one of the crews, the torpedo bomber crews. We were separate from the dive bombers. They had their own book like this, if they ever had one. I don't know.
So were these the kind of views that you would see from the plane, or were you just looking through the screen the entire time for bombing? Would you see aerial views like the bombs going off?
Not really, no.
Okay.
But they always had photo planes.
Mm-hmm.
They always had one plane doing photos with every mission for documentation. This is the next one we hit. This is Leyte. That was a rest stop, I think, there in Leyte. Guam, that's where we pulled in because one of the screws was screwed up on the ship. And while we were there,
so how long were you in Guam for?
I think it was around 3 or 4 days, maybe a little longer. It wasn't a lengthy time.
Okay.
But we did miss a big raid, a massive raid that
you were supposed to be a part of.
Right, yeah. And like I say, that cost me another medal, but they could have got discharged a little sooner. Here's the Eddie Brocken show on the big T. This is a thing we did to kill what was left of the Japanese Navy, and we killed it. Believe me, we killed it. That's the Hyuga. That's a battleship that's sitting on the bottom. See it?
Yep.
There's a couple more. the heavy cruiser Tone. Them were Jap ships that are no more. Here's Steve and Dick Trugaskis. This is Dick Trugaskis, the one I got a road called Canal Diary.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that went on a mission with this guy.
Okay.
Next time out, he got knocked off.
Mm-hmm.
There's more stuff we hit. Tokyo, here. From the day of commissioning, every member of the squadron had on its mind that someday we would see Tokyo. That day came on July 30th when our job to hit the Tokyo something or other, the Japanese, the most important fighter interceptor field in the Tokyo area, just 7 miles west of the Imperial Palace. Here again was no quick strike and fast retirement over water and comforting lifeguard subs, but a long haul of 100 miles over Japan's most densely populated area, the Kanto Plain surrounding Tokyo Bay. The idea of getting knocked down in the middle of the Yokohama, Kawasaki, or Tokyo was not appealing, and the entire area was reported to be one heavy concentration of anti-aircraft guns.
So were you bombing targets in Tokyo?
Yeah, that day.
Mm-hmm.
These are all these here are crew members of the torpedo bombers.
They were 3-man crews?
Yeah, the pilot, the radio man, and the turret.
Okay.
Here's one here where it says, that's Fujiyama.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things it says, what big disappointment was not seeing the snow cap up there.
Mm-hmm.
Northern Honshu.
Do you recall what your mission was for there?
Aminato Naval Base, bastion of Japanese strength on northern Honshu. This was next on the Admiral's docket. Our planes roared in on August 9th, but due to weather conditions, our strikes were directed at other airfields. Many planes were damaged on the ground and fuel and ammo dumps blown up. That afternoon, plane broke through the clouds to lay their bombs on Okinawa Field. The following day, our strikes again took up the pounding of shipping at the naval base. We encountered one of the heaviest anti-aircraft barrages we had ever seen. A few planes suffered minor damage. George pulled a Hiroshima on a small coastal village. This was one of our planes that got a bomb stuck in his a bomb in the plane, bomb that was armed. There's a wire that runs through a small propeller. This bomb got armed, and he couldn't come back on board ship with it. He had a gesture that. So this one guy peels off. There's a small village down there, and he's got these. The bomb. I think we had 500 powders that day, big one, 4 of them, and he went over this small village. And it said he pulled a Hiroshima on it. He obliterated it on his own.
So normally when they had extra bombs, did they drop them in the water just to get rid of them?
Yeah, you can't come back aboard ship. You're not a carrier. No way. You either jettison or you jettison yourself. The afternoon broke through the clouds so later. Bombs on Omanada airfield. The following day, our whole strike took up the pounding of shipping and the naval base. We encountered one of the heaviest air. I guess I read that.
Mm-hmm.
A few planes suffered minor, and George pulled the Hiroshima on it. Yeah. A second strike the same day found Amori already bombed and burning. We merely added the final touches to the ferry piers and storage and shipping. And so another death blow against the winning Jap power was struck. Waning Jap power. There's some more of the crew and pictures of. See what we got there. The smoking lamp is lighted. On board ship, when you can smoke, there's a lantern they light. Japanese shipping target. Car factory. Oil storage. On to the next target. Tokyo. Probably one of the most difficult and hazardous missions assigned to our squadron was the task of destroying the Tokyo Shibuya electronic plants. After an early takeoff, our planes passed through the hot access Shield Peninsula. Bad weather forced us to chase alternate targets, and our bombs fell on the Yokohama dock area with unobserved results. Our fighters gave their annual individual attention to the airfields and ground installations. Perhaps the day was canceled and the further hops of this day were canceled and the fleet retired from the area. This is my picture of the little ones you've seen in here. My pilot happened to get a Navy Cross, which is the highest decoration you can get. So he got a lot of attention in another part of this book. So instead of us, it robbed us of getting our picture in the book here. So, but this is us. This is our three. That's me. That's my pilot, and that's Romberger.
Oh, okay.
He's still alive. I don't know whatever became of the pilot. These were guys that had a jettison, and they had a three-man invasion of the Japanese homeland, forced to bail out over Tokyo. This is Brega. His name is Brega. The Brega Armada floated around the bay for 7 hours. They had a ditch. And then an army pilot, a rescue pilot, they just flew in an Army PBY. That's a big old flying boat that lands on water, a pontoon boat. Doesn't land on an airfield. Now they know why the Navy taught the Army to fly our P-boats. They rescued these three guys and brought them back aboard ship. So they rescued them, and then they dropped them off at a U.S. submarine. And these guys were on the sub for a while, and they told the guys, "You guys must be nuts to get in one of these and go under the water." And they said, "You must be nuts to get up there and get shot at." Or just a trade-off. This is post-war now. And anti-climax, now that it is really here, well, it's over now, let's get home. No, boys, first you must fly some patrols, and then you get to see the Empire besides. It takes points to get out of the re-enlist, to get out. Re-enlist, join the regulars. No thanks, make mine civilian, mate.
Did you have to do any patrols after the war initially ended?
No, once we got back, it was over.
Okay.
Here's Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
That's Hiroshima, and Nagasaki was number 2.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been, if Hitler and them gang had won this war, not us, that could have been New York and Boston, not Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Look at what's left there.
Yeah.
Nothing. There's the entire fleet surrendered. That was what was left of the Japanese super fleet they had.
No, did you happen to see this?
Just from the air.
Okay. What was it like to see that?
Well, I was glad we weren't not doing any shooting or anything. With the official surrender of Japan, the air group was given the task of aerial patrol for the line of supply ships coming to Japan from Okinawa and points east. Our daily airfield patrols over Shokugava, Honshu, and our supply drops on prisoner of war camps gave VT-87 a close-up observation of our conquered land. This is a prisoner of war camp that they had.
So after the Japanese originally surrendered in between Seattle, did you do anything in between there? Or was it right from the surrender, did you go straight to Seattle? Was there anything in between?
Just a stop in Hawaii.
Okay.
Because we had, at that time, ships like the carriers that went through Hawaii, the whole hangar deck, not the flight deck, the hangar deck, was loaded with cots.
Mm-hmm.
And we took back maybe 1,000 soldiers back to get discharged, back home. And we ran about a day or two, we ran into some real tough weather coming back into Seattle there.
Mm-hmm.
And these army guys were throwing up all over the place. They weren't used to it, the ship would go one way and 1,000 cots would go that way, and then there was literally vomit all over the hangar deck. From the decks of the USS Ticonderoga, we peered through field glasses across Tokyo Bay, Yokohama, and the suburbs of Tokyo. This is a peaceful-looking country now, but less than a month ago it was teeming with soldiers, sailors, civilians devoting their entire strength and resources to wage war. Less than a month ago, our planes from the Essex-class carrier were ferreting out the hidden Jap Air Force, pounding shipping and essential war industries. This September Sunday morning, all is quiet except for the occasional drone of an American transport plane taking off or landing at a nearby airfield. The calm after the storm. It's interesting reading. This is Air Group 87 staff.
Mm-hmm.
This is Fighting 87. These are the fighter pilots.
Mm-hmm.
This is bombing fighting.
Are these actual signatures of the people that you served with?
Yeah, a couple of them are. I didn't get many to sign it. This is Bombing Squadron 87. These are the dive bombers.
Mm-hmm.
These are the all the pilots. And this is Lieutenant Commander Billy Miles. He was a top dog. Some more chiefs. These are chiefs and crewmen. And when you get to the last page, last person,
Saving the best for last, that's all.
and that's the way we got paid. I had to stand in a goddamn pay line till the absolute end to get my money. But that's it. And these are all pictures of everywhere that ships went from the time they were commissioned until they were decommissioned.
Yep.
This is a training squadron in Fort Lauderdale, number 13. There's me and this one.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for your service, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
The pleasure is mine. I never thought anybody would ask me.
Oh no, this was fascinating. I'm very glad you decided to do this.
I mean, the fact that it's so many years, I'm 89 now, since I've been out, that nobody ever says, what did you do in the war? That war has been forgotten about. But at least we were treated fairly. They not like anything like the guys that fought in Vietnam, come back to what them poor guys went through.
Yeah. But again, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
The pleasure is mine.